Welcome, everybody. In today's session, we will be looking at what are the 5 different habits that you can build to improve your English communication. Before I start with the session, a brief introduction about myself. I'm Vanita Bhatnagar. I work as a legal editor and mentor at 𝘱𝗶𝗂𝗍. My specialization is in human rights law, and I write extensively on creating diverse workplaces, gender issues, and public policy. So that was a little about myself. You can also you can also give your introduction in the chat box so that all of us here know who we are, where we come from. To give a little more background, I belong to a Marwari family, and in my home, the basic communication language is Hindi. So nobody in my family speaks English now, which became a major roadblock for me. So I had to develop various ways, invent strategies so that I get better at communication. Also, my understanding is that at whatever level you are, I mean, you might be at a beginner level where you can have basic conversations with everybody. You might also be at a very advanced level where you are communicating in English every day, communicating with clients, arguing before the court. But still, I believe there is a certain scope where you would want to improve your communication skills. So it is just not about speaking effectively, but also how you understand communication from others and how well you respond. So we're going to cater to all of that in today's session. I will tell you how I made my environment such that I was always surrounded by activities wherein I was required to speak in English, because this was my major roadblock. Okay, coming from a Marwari family where we all of us spoke Hindi at home, I couldn't. There was no environment for me where I could speak in English. So what I did was that when I entered college, I constantly engaged myself in activities where I was required to speak English. So, for instance, I started hosting a lot of college events. I participated in several moot court competitions. So, I did over 7 moot court competitions in just 3 years, both at national and international level. Now, what this did was that it gave me a whole lot of experience and exposed me to an environment where I was required to speak in English, right? So, specifically, like, when you are arguing in a moot court competition, you'll also be required to respond to the judge's question very frequently. So, it is not always like, you'll have a script in hand and, you'll deliver that. But participating in moot court competitions also helped me on thinking on feet and responding to judges' questions impromptu, right? So that's how participating in moot court competitions was very helpful for me in developing my journey towards better communication. Now, what I believe is that, if you're a student in a law school, or even if you're a working professional, you need to constantly look for ways where you can upgrade your communication. Like for me, currently, I work as an editor at 𝘱𝗶𝗂𝗍, right? And it is very important for me that when I am editing someone's article, all right, whatever feedback I'm giving to a student, they should be able to understand it, right? My feedback should be effectively delivered to that student. If I do not do that, I will fail at my job, right? So it doesn't matter. It is not about my legal knowledge. It is not about how well I can edit articles, but it is largely about how well I am able to communicate my feedback to my students so that they are able to follow it. Now, this might also be true for lawyers. As a lawyer, it is not always that you'll be communicating good news to your client, right? I mean, there may be days where your matter is adjourned, where your bail application is rejected. Maybe you were trying to negotiate a transaction and you couldn't close at a specified price. Now, all of this communication needs to happen to your client very intentionally, right? you can't just tell them that, hey, the bail application is rejected because of XYZ rounds. It cannot, that communication between you and your client, it cannot be only about, it cannot be only logical communication, right? It needs to be intentional. You need to be able to console your client. You should be able to reason out with your clients that, why on the first place there is a bad news for them, right? So, you know you might, now somebody who's not able to do that, somebody who's not able to communicate with clients in an empathetic manner, they might be losing a lot of clients. Now, this is not happening because they lack legal knowledge or any other skill, but this is entirely because they are not able to communicate with people in a specific manner, right? So therefore, working on your communication is very important, no matter at which level you are. So this is also very relevant for students when they are applying for job interviews. Sometimes, they keep wondering that perhaps I couldn't make to the interview because I don't have the requisite skill, or maybe, I'm not very good at the skills that they were looking at. But perhaps it may be that, you were rejected because of your communication skills. So there's nothing wrong in your resume. There's nothing wrong with your skills. There is nothing wrong with your knowledge. But what is the missing piece is probably your communication. So therefore, I would suggest that at whichever level you are, it is very important that you're constantly working on your English communication, and you're looking at ways in which you can, improve. So first, you need to identify at what level you are. Now, let's say if you're at a very basic level, in that case, you'll be required to work on your communication skills much more intentionally. Like, for instance, if somebody is not aware about basic grammar, then probably, they might want to consider taking a course. Like, we have a diploma course in English communication at LawSikho. So you need to first identify at what level you are, maybe at a beginner level, or at an intermediate level, or at an advanced level, and then start incorporating those skills in your everyday routine. Now, what are those skills? We are going to look at that in today's session. I will quickly do my screen share. Do let me know if my screen is visible to all of you. Is it visible? You can maybe just type it in the chat box if you can see my screen, yes or no. Also, before I delve deeper into this, I would also want to understand from all of you, what are the challenges that you guys face while communicating in English? Like, what are your obstacles? What is that you think you struggle the most when it comes to communication? It'll be great if you can keep the session very interactive. Okay. Panak says sentence formation. Janvi's talking about lack of vocabulary. Dinesh says before communication, they feel nervous. Okay. Veronica says that I basically struggle with grammar part. All right. So, it's very important that we are able to identify which part of our communication we need to work on. Like, for some people, it is that, they're very good at their grammar. Okay. There's nothing wrong with their grammar, but what they struggle with is vocabulary, or what they might struggle is confidence, right? So the first step towards learning English communication is to identify what are your bottlenecks, what is the roadblock that you're facing in communication, and then maybe you need to spend slightly more time on addressing that area. Okay. Now, in today's session, what we're going to look at is there are two types of learning. Okay. One is natural learning that just happens on a day-to-day basis. So even if you're not very deliberate about it, intentional about it, you'll keep learning certain concepts on a day-to-day basis. The other is deliberate learning, wherein you are actually making an effort towards learning something, right? Now, these are the two basic process. But what happens is, in my understanding, you're able to learn faster and have a better understanding when you merge these both concepts. So today I'm going to introduce you to a new concept that's called virtual immersion. Anybody who knows about this concept, virtual immersion, you can say yes or no. If you have any understanding about this concept, you can probably type it in the chat box. Okay. All right. So virtual immersion is a concept where we mix these two types of learning, okay? Natural learning and deliberate learning. Oh, so Syed says that he knows about virtual immersion. Can you please share with us in the chat box? Aman says that there is no shortcut or hack at all. Practice, 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 and only practice can make you good in communication, as per my experience. That's very correct, Aman. So what we're going to look in today's session is when you're practicing, we're going to look at 5 different things that you can incorporate in your daily routine. Okay, you definitely have to practice those 5 habits every day. Then only there will be there'll be progress in your English communication. All right. Syed, if you can tell us about what you know about the concept of virtual immersion. So what is important here is that we mix both these concepts, okay? Natural learning and deliberate learning, right? Now, how do you do that? Now, you have to imagine ways wherein in your daily routine, you are able to incorporate ways that become a part of your life. Now, when they become a part of your life, you will automatically not only be able to write in English, listen in English, speak in English, but also at the same time, you'll be able to think in English. Thinking in English is the most important concept for advancing your communication skills, right? So there might be a lot of people who are able to write better, who are able to speak well. They can understand English communication, they can listen, but they're not able to think in English. That is a major roadblock for a lot of people, and this happens very inadvertently. Okay, they don't even realize that this is the missing block, that they're not able to think in English. Now, to cultivate an environment where you are able to think in English as well, it is important that you surround yourself with ways or techniques. You create like a virtual environment wherein everything is happening in English. Now, for native speakers, like, for instance, let's say if you move to abroad, like to a country where English is the main language, those people will not face this as a problem. Why? Because they are natively speaking in English. The entire world. So even when they are communicating at a shop, when they are speaking at a restaurant, everywhere, okay, the language they're using in English. So for them, it's not a problem. But for people like us, this becomes a barrier. Therefore, it is very important for us to cultivate an environment wherein we are like the entire environment is such that enables us to also think in English. Now, how will we do that? For that, we're going to look at 5 different habits. Okay. In the meanwhile, if any one of you who has been trying to improve your English communication skills, if you have certain techniques, you can also share that with me in the chat box. All right. Any particular thing that you have been following. These 5 habits are completely from my own experience that I do. I would also like to give you a little more background on how I came up with these 5 habits. So after my graduation, I was working in Delhi for 4 years. Back then, I never really felt this as a barrier. Okay, recently I moved down to Alwar. That's a city in Rajasthan. And after coming here, I started feeling that I'm not doing enough to improve my communication skills. I am just at a level where I was, because here particularly I've been doing work from home for a while. I mean, most of us are because of COVID. So the only people that I interact with who speak in English are my colleagues. Other than that, there is no such environment where I can practice English. So I thought that, I'm going to become very dull at communication if I do not do something about it. Right. So therefore, I culled out these 5 different habits that I have incorporated in my daily life. And I thought maybe if you do it, it might help you as well. Right. So if there is anything, you can also mention it in the chat box, any particular habit that you have picked on. Aman says that just pick a random topic and try to speak for 5 to 10 minutes. Oh, that's a very good thing. Maybe, peer learning. You can have a peer with whom you can constantly discuss on certain topics and ensure that you're doing it as a part of a daily routine, right? So maybe let's say Syed and I want to improve our communication. Jasheet says, if I can speak in Hindi, yes, I can, of course, explain in Hindi as well. Just a quick understanding from the audience. How well versed are you with Hindi? So if I speak partially in English and Hindi, will that work for all of you? All right. Okay. Okay. For Ananda, Hindi doesn't work. All right. All right. So what I'll do is I'll only English. All right. So I understand we are a bunch of mixed people who understand, like half of them only understand English and others are not comfortable with that language. So what I'm going to do is that I'm also going to speak in Hindi so that people who are more comfortable in that language are able to get that. And at the same time, I'm also going to speak the same thing in English as well, so that you are also, like the people who don't understand Hindi are also able to follow what I'm mentioning about, right? Dinkesh says, daily I write diary in English. Now what I did a whole day. Oh, that's a brilliant idea, Dinkesh. And that is also one of the habits that I'm going to talk about in today's session. So let's look into what I do. So first is listen to a podcast. Now you'll get plenty of options on Spotify. Okay? So what I particularly do is that every morning when I get up and I'm preparing my breakfast, I log into Spotify and I start playing my podcast. Now, here are the 3 podcasts that I listen to almost every day. One is Three Things by the Indian Express. Other is All Things Policy by Takshila Institute. Now, all these are free, okay? And all these are available on Spotify. So I believe hum sabke paas phone hai. All of us have a cell phone with us. We can download Spotify and we can start listening to these podcasts. Now, these could also be with respect to your interest areas. I mean, I'm not saying listen to these 3 podcasts only. Aman has a suggestion, Ranbir Aluwalia. Yeah, that's a very good podcast, I would say. These are the 3 that are personally my favorite. You can pick yours depending upon your interest area. Why I listen to these 3 is because I also write a lot on public policy. These podcasts help me give an idea about what are the latest changes that are happening. Okay. So they tackle news. So Three Things by Indian Express, what they do in this is that they pick 3 most important news items and they deliberate much more in detail from the policy perspective, that why is this change being brought, what is the perspective. They try and understand the entire scenario in a way more deeper way. So therefore I listen to this. All Things Policy, again, they discuss a policy issue. So recently there was a new policy that was framed with respect to Uber, like for Uber and Ola, taxi aggregators. They try and analyze the policy from the legal perspective, from how it will be, whether it will be helpful to different stakeholders, right? They also try and look into what are the current data that is available on a particular topic, right? So these are podcasts that help me in doing my work better. Okay, so when I'm listening to these podcasts, I'm also able to write better pitches to the editorials of different media houses that I want. Similarly, you can browse through Spotify and figure out what are things that you would want to listen to. Maybe let's say some of you are interested in football, some of you are interested in cricket. So you can, it has to be a fun activity. Also, Three Things is something that I would suggest all of you can do, because it will help you they do talk about the news every day, 3 more important pieces of news every day. So you'll be able to track news, which is helpful for all of us. Being law students and lawyers, we are expected to be on the top of news every day. uh, and the rest of it you can create on your own. Like maybe, let's say, if you're more inclined in business law, you can listen to the Quint, you can listen to Quads, you can listen to the economics radio. There are a plethora of options on Spotify. You can just pick and choose whatever you like, right? And you can integrate that habit, so you don't have to specifically take out time for doing that. Just combine that activity of listening with another activity that you're already doing. Okay, so it could be commuting to work, maybe taking a shower. For me, it is making my breakfast. So every day when I make my breakfast, I first thing is, before I even turn on the gas, I first turn on my Spotify. So you can club this activity in whichever fashion you want, whatever you're doing on an everyday basis. Now, what is important here is that don't let that podcast play in the background. Okay, it shouldn't be that the podcast is playing in the background and mentally you're somewhere else. It will not help. Okay, this exercise will not help in that case. Why listening is important? So that you're able to comprehend what is delivered. So what I want you to do after you've listened to the podcast on whatever topic, just do a quick mental revision. Okay, so for this daily habit one, that is listening to a podcast, you also have to add on one small step. And what is that one small step? You have to quickly revise. So three things is basically a podcast for 25 minutes. So after you have listened to the whole thing, just summarize it in one line for yourself, so that you have a clear understanding about what you heard for those 25 minutes. Okay, it could be also with respect to any particular phrase or any particular word that you picked from during the session. All right, you can also, so for probably somebody who does not have any activity to club it with, simple, every time all of us take our breakfast, right? If not breakfast, all of us have our lunch. Just play a podcast in the background while doing these activities. Okay, now the second step is practice a word. Now, so when I log in for my work every day, before I start working, I pick up a word and I practice on it. Now, this is not a word that you will start looking up on Google, or you pick it up from dictionary. That is not what I'm suggesting. What you need to do is, maybe from the podcast that you listened to, or maybe from any recent conversation that you had, any word that you would want to pick, right? Just from your everyday life. Okay, you don't have to specifically search for that word. Just pick that word, right? One word a day, practice the pronunciation, understand the usage, understand the context in which you will be able to use that word, and then frame a sentence. So the entire activity should take you 5 minutes. So 5 minutes before you actually begin your daily work. It could be anything, okay? Like for law students who are going to law schools, before you start studying, before you log into your class, just spend 5 minutes practicing the word. While practicing this word, remember, you have to rely on your memory. Okay, see, if you are looking the word up on the Google, there are chances that you will just forget that word. Okay, it is very unlikely that you will remember the word that you're searching from Google. So therefore, I am emphasizing on the fact that this word that you're practicing needs to come out from your memory. You have to rely on your memory. You have to use your memory more intentionally. So anything, maybe any expression that you heard in the podcast, right? Pick that word, practice pronunciation, practice usage. So when I say usage, you need to create a sentence on your own, right? You can just Google the word. Maybe if you're not very clear on how is it used, you can understand how a sentence made on those particular word, and then make your own sentence for that particular word. Now, why is this important? You must have noticed that we know a lot of words, right? I might know like 1,000 words, but I'm able to use only 33% of that. right? We know more words, but we are dependent on a very limited vocabulary. This particular habit is very useful for all those people who think that they are lacking in vocabulary. We are not lacking in vocabulary because we know less words, but because we are not able to use them on an everyday basis. So it could be any legal expression, anything that you come across. Make it a habit that you're working on the pronunciation. Sometimes, since we are not very clear on the pronunciation, we are not able to recall that word. Okay, so therefore you say it aloud like 20 times, 30 times, so that uh, uh, not just your memory, your muscles are also working on that particular word. It will become a lot more easier for your brain to remember and recall. So whatever word that you're practicing, you work on the pronunciation, you speak it aloud, then you frame a sentence and use that word in a sentence, right? So you do this entire thing for 5 minutes every day before starting on to the main task for your day. Like it could be anything, all right? So for somebody, if they go to courts, practice before judges, maybe 5 minutes, just spend 5 minutes on practicing the word, right? The next habit is write. So what I do in particular is that after I have finished my day, just before I log out, I write something. It could be anything. It could be, you might want to write a LinkedIn post, a Facebook post, an Instagram post, something on Twitter. You might want to spend a couple of hours maybe on an article. Somebody suggested that, daily writing about in their diary how their day was spent. So you, before logging out for your day, before you end, just spend another 5 minutes in writing. Okay, so it is very helpful if you write a LinkedIn post. So that will not just help you in improving your communication skills, but it will also help you in networking. A lot of times people might have a doubt that, what do I post every day on LinkedIn? I have nothing to post, right? So what you can do is you can match it up with your specializations area, or you can probably just share your experience, whatever your experience about the day on LinkedIn. Like for instance, maybe let's say you learned about a new management skill. Maybe that is what you would want to share. Or like for instance, I run a thread today in gender on LinkedIn and Twitter. Now what I do in today in gender is, since I work on this area, every day I am spending at least 10 minutes to 30 minutes on understanding what are the recent developments in the gender space. So what I do is I pick up the most important news item for the day and I write a post on LinkedIn on that. You can do that for your different areas. Maybe let's say if somebody is specializing in mergers and acquisition, you might want to speak about the recent deals that are happening in the business. If somebody is working on a criminal law, maybe you want to talk about how you pleaded before the council, pleaded before the judge. How was your experience, right? So whichever way you can incorporate by writing a post on whichever platform that's comfortable to you, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, that will help you in two ways. One, in building your network, and also improving your English. The second activity could be writing an article. Now, writing an article is very important for lawyers as well as law students. As you all know that, we lawyers cannot advertise themselves. I can't say that, hey, hello, I'm a very good posh practitioner. I cannot do that. But I can constantly keep writing about my practice and my work will speak for itself, right? So what I can do is on an everyday basis, I can spend some time on research, on writing on recent developments that has happened. So this can also happen in a post format or in an article format. Now, for some people who are acquainted with the practice of writing, they might want to devote like hours for this activity. But let's say even if you have 10 minutes in hand, okay, even if you can commit only for 10 minutes, that is also good enough, right? So you can now, for article writing, what you will need is you will need to have a clear idea on what idea you will be working on. Then every day you can spend like 10 minutes, 30 minutes depending upon whatever time you have in your hand, and start writing. Okay. uh, if you don't want to do any of these two activities, you can just journal, you can just write about your daily experience in your diary. So the third important activity is writing. Again, you have to do it with a purpose and intentional understanding that you're trying to do this for improving your English. You're not just doing it for the love of writing. Okay, you're also doing this activity to improve your English. Now what you'll do is, whatever you've learned, maybe the word that you were practicing, maybe an expression that you heard in the podcast, you would try and incorporate that in your writing. Okay, so this is how you'll be linking all the activities that we're doing throughout the day. So maybe let's say the word that you learned was repudiate. Maybe you would want to incorporate the word in writing the post, okay, or writing the article. So try and link all the three activities that you're doing. The next important habit is reading. So what I do is, after I have completed my day, I've done the post, everything, just before I'm about to sleep, I spend around 10 to 15 minutes reading. Now, a lot of you might not like reading books, okay? But as lawyers, it is inevitable that we can avoid reading. We have to have a practice where we are constantly exposed to reading. So those of you who are looking at ways to develop reading as a habit, what you can do is you can subscribe to a newsletter. I have mentioned a couple that I follow. One is the Ken, the Quads, LawSikho, and Live Law. Now, these are the 4 newsletters that I love. Now, what the Ken does is, now the Ken summarizes one news item, one business news item, okay? And I like how they write, okay? They write in a very interesting storytelling format. So it's very engaging and it is not very long, okay? So newsletters are typically like what? 1,000 words, that's it. It will not even take you like 5 minutes. So if not all these 4, whichever is your favorite, you can experiment and start reading a newsletter every day, if not a book, okay? Another quick habit is that you can read a book on Headway. Now, Headway is an app. It's free. You can download it from Play Store. Now, what Headway does is, Headway gives you an access to, Headway has summaries of all the books, and it gives you access to one book for free every day, okay? So imagine you can read like 30 summaries of 30 different books in a month. So, and those are written very crisply, okay? This is just like 10 pages picked from that book. And they're written in a very simple language. So if you don't want to invest in a book, if you're not somebody who's very comfortable reading for longer hours, maybe you can just do these 2 things, okay? Reading a newsletter and reading a book on Headway. It's a free application you can download. Syed is talking about share the first and the second slide. Of course, I'll just scroll a little back. We'll revise quickly. First is that you listen to a podcast. These are the ones that I listen to. You can create your own list, okay? The only important thing is that you have to match this exercise with something that you are already doing so that it is easier for you to practice on a daily basis, right? The second is you have to practice a word. How I ensure that I am doing this is that before I log into my work, before I start reading my emails, before I start planning for my everyday work, it just takes 5 minutes, okay? You don't have to spend hours, just 5 minutes, practice that word. The important aspect is that you rely on your memory, okay? So that you're able to use that word again and again. Before I log off, I just write. It could be my experience about how my day was, how I interacted with students. It could be about the post that I spoke about today in gender, anything that you like, okay? It could also be an article that you're working on, that you're planning to write on. So maybe like 10 minutes in a day. I hear a lot of time people telling me that, they have no time to write an article. They're working professionals. They have a full-time job to do. And the only thing I tell them is that, you don't have to find time explicitly. You just have to block like 10 minutes in a day, and that's all. Even if you write for 10 minutes every day, it'll be 300 minutes like for the whole month. So that's about it. Just block 10 minutes. You can also journal. If those are the above two habits are not something that you would want to do, you can just put your thoughts in a journal. Here the important trick is that you have to be intentional about your learning, and you have to use whatever expressions maybe you heard in your podcast, or any new word that you were learning. Try and use that in your journal while writing the post or in the article. So try and link all the three activities. Lastly, spend time reading. Okay, reading is very, very important. So you can either read a newsletter or a book on a headway, or if you also like reading, you can pick any favorite book and then start reading that. Even if you do like 2 pages a day, that is also good enough, right? The important aspect is doing. The last and the most important habit is tracking. So a lot of times I have seen people telling me that, they're they're listening to podcasts, but they don't know whether they are able to grasp it or not. Sometimes they lose track. So they do it for the first 2 days, and the third day, sometimes they're doing, sometimes they're not doing. There is no tracking that they are able to do. So therefore, the most important aspect is that you track what you have done in the entire day, right? Again, this will only take 5 minutes, but you can skip any of the activities. Now, let's say you're traveling and you don't have time for doing all those 5 things. Maybe you can skip the other activities, but ensure that you're doing this one, because this is the habit that will tell you how is your progress, where are you in the level. So if you're beginning from a beginner's level and trying to move to an intermediate level, or if you're trying to move from intermediate to an advanced level, tracking and measuring is the only thing that will be telling you how good you are at it. Okay, so what you have to do is, now what I do is, in my everyday notebook, I mention these activities in my to-do list. These are the 4 things that I have to do, and at the end of the day, I just put a tick mark to check, was I able to do these things or was I not able to do these things. Even if you've missed on an activity, that is all right. Okay, you don't have to beat yourself up that, oh no, shit, I couldn't give time to reading. That is all right. Okay, you might come back to that activity maybe the second day, but nevertheless, you have to still keep tracking. All right, so this will also help you in consolidating and reflecting about what you have learned throughout, right? So in the entire 5 habits that we've spoke about, it is not only about to be able to listen, speak, or write in English. It is also that you have to be able to think in English. And while you are tracking, right, you would want to, like, by the end of the day, you can just again rethink and revise and recap, what was the new word that I've learned, right? You might want to again go back to the expression that you heard in the podcast, or maybe look at the new concept that you learned in while writing your article. Okay, so ensure that you are reflecting back to how was your day. Just review, because that entire activity had to be need to be intentional in order for you to improving English. Vignesh has just downloaded Headway. Oh, that's great, Vignesh. So Headway will enable you, it will give you an access to 1 free book every day. So you can read that. So I think this was all from my end when it comes to 5 different habits. These are very simple things that you can build on an everyday basis. All right. Besides that, what I would also encourage is speaking. Now, a lot of times you might not be exposed to an environment where you'll be required to speak. Okay. So if you're in college, ensure that you're participating in a lot of activities. I understand, because all of us are working remotely or studying remotely. There might not be a lot of college activities that are happening, but you can take the initiatives and start doing webinars, right? Start doing everything on Zoom, right? Have quiz, you can organize quizzes, any activity. Personally, this is one thing that has really helped me, because I did not have that kind of an atmosphere. So even if you're making mistakes, even if you're fumbling, that is all right. The important aspect is to get started. So create an environment wherein you are required to speak in English. Okay. No, Vignesh, it's free. Headway is free. You don't need to pay any amount for that. Okay. Dinkesh talks about that sometimes they are unable to frame sentences. Now, here you need to understand what is a challenge that you face while framing sentences. Is it because of grammar? Your concepts for grammar are not very clear, or is it because that you don't know how to use a particular word in a particular context, right? So for you in this case, the most important habit would be the second one that we spoke about: practice a word. So when you're picking a word, you try and frame a sentence around it. And your sentences doesn't need to be very complicated. You can start with very simple words, like for example, vacancy. Okay, vacancy is a word that we all know, for we know the meaning. Just try and make simpler sentences and then advance to making complex sentences. It is also very important that we are thinking in English. Now, how you can incorporate that a lot more in your everyday life is, we all have conversations with ourselves, right? There is a little voice inside us that keeps speaking to us all the time throughout the day. Make it in English. Whatever conversations that you're having with yourself, make it in English. Like, today I have to give this webinar on 5 daily habits. Whatever thought is going in your head, make it in English. That will go a long way in improving your communication skills. I hope, Dinkesh, that is helpful. Okay. Also, when you're doing your daily habits too, you should probably spend like a little more time and see where is the clear gap. Is it only with respect to grammar, or there is something else as well? So you need to be very intentional while doing that activity, and start with simpler words. You don't need to start framing sentences for complex ideas. Do it for very, very simple words, like for instance, track, consolidate, reflect, anything, any word that you see across you. Okay. If you do it on a daily basis, I mean, imagine you're able to frame 30 sentences on your own in an entire month. It will go a long way in helping in building your communication. Anybody else who has further questions? Anytime. Any other questions? Yes. So the email from which you have enrolled, that email has a certain instructions. So if you fulfill those instructions, you will be getting your participation certificate. Also, one more thing. Now, once you understand your level, you're at which level, you might want to identify what kind of training you need. Now, for instance, sometimes somebody would need a training with respect to improving their listening abilities. Somebody would need training with respect to building their comprehension abilities. So while doing your daily work, all right, be more intentional and start figuring the gaps, and then you can start plugging them. Margaret has a question. You can please unmute yourself and tell us. Okay. Redmi is asking for books for they're in first year. What are the books that they should read? So one thing I would like to suggest is that in your first year, you should you should read a lot of books on jurisprudence. Okay, that will go a long way. So if you speak about novels, you can read Jeffrey Archer. Okay, you can read a lot of crime thrillers. You can also read Sherlock. You can also read Adventures of Lupin. Okay, those are all very interesting books to read. Also, you need to identify what are your interest areas and then read. I mean, me telling you to read something on football might not help, because let's say football is not your interest area, so you will not enjoy reading a book on that subject a lot. Okay, so therefore what you need to do is you need to first identify what is that you enjoy doing a lot, what are your interest areas, and probably read a book on that. Jeffrey Archer is one author that I can recommend you. Okay, and also read a lot of books on jurisprudence. So maybe you want to read John Rawls. Okay, all of that will be very helpful. Diva says that she keeps forgetting words and my 10 senses are not good. So again, it's very good that you're able to identify what are the gap areas. Now, tackling the first part of forgetting words. Again, habit number 2 will be very helpful for you. You have to keep picking from your memory. You have to use your memory for checking the words. Now, what happens is that, we'll be reading a lot of stuff online, listening to podcasts and all of that. But if you're not able to recall those words at the right time, it will not help. You might not know a lot of words, but if you're not able to remember them, if you're not able to use them, it will not help. So what you do in that case is that you ensure that you're constantly recapping. Okay, you're making them a part of your world. So let's say anything that you read today, okay, or anything, any new word that you came across, okay, and you're already aware about the meaning. I'm not saying to go on for words that you don't know the meaning of. Something that you already know, just pick that word, make a sentence, pronounce it a couple of times. Making a sentence is very important, because you might know a lot of words, but if you don't know how to make a sentence on it, if you don't know how to use them, you will not be able to use them any which way. Okay, now let's say I know the word repudiate, but I don't know how to put it in a sentence. I will never be able to use this word. So even if I know the meaning, I'm not using this word because my brain is not accustomed to the kind of sentences that can be framed on this particular word. So make sentences on those words, right? And keep recapping. So you can use these 5 things that we spoke about. You can incorporate that word in your writing. You can incorporate that word maybe in your journal, and then keep recapping. That, I think that should be helpful, Diva. Also, with respect to your tenses, here you need to take a particular course to improving your grammar. I mean, we have one at LawSikho. Okay, so if you're not good at grammar, you can also study on internet. Maybe if you don't want to enroll for a course, you can also since you know that your tenses are not that great, you should constantly pay attention and involve yourself in activities wherein you are required to write tenses correctly. So if you're writing an article, okay, your article will not be accepted if there are grammatical errors. So after writing, you will have to do a grammar check. So when you're doing a grammar check, you'll get constantly aware about the errors that you're making with respect to tenses. Okay, you can also check BBC Online. So BBC Online has a lot of grammar courses, free grammar courses. You can also check that out. Kedar says that suggest good books on English grammar. Okay, so I think I read English grammar only back in school. Okay, what that used to be the part of my curriculum. Okay, but if you want to improve your English grammar, what I'll suggest is you can check BBC Online. Okay, they have good sources, good free sources. Besides that, again, the same thing. I mean, write in English, do a grammar check. You will look at your errors. And once you're looking at your errors on an everyday basis, you will be able to work on them, right? So you're learning one thing at a time. Okay, so Venkata is asking me if I can create a group only for the purpose of chatting and communicating with people. I'm not sure if I'll be able to do that, but so this option is available with our course. Okay, so if somebody has enrolled for a diploma in English communication course, we have a WhatsApp group for everybody. And what we do in that group is that we allow people to interact with each other. You can have mock sessions, you can reflect with each other, right? So there we do have a WhatsApp group so that our students are able to practice more and more. Suraj is saying that whenever I search any word on dictionary or Google it, reflect many meaning that cause trouble for particular context to understand. What to do in this regard? That's a very good question, Suraj, because a lot of words are used in different contexts. Okay, so it might not be correct. Like for example, throughout the sessions, I've been speaking about repudiate a lot of time, right? So repudiate means that you reject or you reject something. Okay, you do not approve of something. You deny to accept certain thing. Now, if you're making a sentence with repudiate, let's say that, I repudiate acts of sexual harassment. Now, it will not be a correct usage of the word. Why? Because this word is used only in the context of rejecting. And when does a rejection happen? When there is an option of acceptance. So therefore, it's not the correct context to use this word. If you'll notice on Google, okay, when you're trying to understand the meaning of a particular word, they also give the context in which that word is used, and they also give you sample sentences. Okay, there are examples, so you build on those examples. So whatever you can also look in thesaurus for similar meaning, okay, to understand greater context, that to which category does this word belong, okay, and then try and frame multiple sentences in different contexts, not just for the one that you want to use that word for, other words as well, okay, other context as well. I hope that was helpful, Suraj. Mohit talks about that I have read Hindi, but I could not be regular because of hectic schedule. I can write, but I found difficulty in speaking English. How can I do that? How can I improve spoken English without getting nervous? All right. Now for this, the most important thing is that you need to expose yourself to an environment where you are required to speak English. Okay. So this particular things comes with practice. Now, how do you make sure that your environment is such wherein you are required to speak in English? Depending upon, if you are a college student, you can start hosting a lot of competitions, hosting a lot of events that are happening in your college. Okay, if you're living in a society, you can again organize events. So you'll have to take a lot of initiatives that will involve, so that the entire event will have the focus on you and you will be required to speak. That's the only way you can master spoken English communication without getting nervous, so that you're very confident. You can also participate, if you're in college, again, you can participate in MUNs, in parliamentary debates, in moot court competitions. All of that will help you in spoken English. Let's say if you're not a college student, if you're a working professional, maybe you would want to enroll yourself in for different activities, whatever your specialization is. Maybe you would want to do webinars on that. Another important hack that I used to use once I was in college again was that start teaching people. So when you start teaching people something, you will again be exposed. Number one, you'll be exposed to that language. You'll be required to use it constantly, and it will allow you to explore the language more holistically. And also because if you're teaching English to somebody, you can sign up with any NGO. Okay, so a lot of NGO in the current time specifically, okay, they're not able to do any on ground work because of COVID. They're also conducting all these classes via Zoom on phone for their students, specifically government schools, right? So you can sign up with an NGO, and maybe once a week you're taking a class on and teaching people English. When you'll be teaching people English, elementary level also, maybe for that matter, I mean, just to getting started with the practice, you will see a tremendous growth in your spoken English. Okay, you can try that and let me know if it works for you, Mohit. It has personally worked for me a lot. Hardik is talking about any good grammar check softwares. You can rely on Grammarly, but See, you need to understand that even Grammarly is not 100%. Okay, so all the free softwares, they might not be 100% accurate. For this, it is important that you understand the rules of grammar. So maybe you can start every day, like for example, when you're practicing a word, and let's say vocabulary is not something that you're focusing on currently. So maybe instead of practicing a word, you're practicing a grammar rule. Okay, so you can switch. So maybe before logging in for your work every day, instead of practicing your word, you're practicing your grammar, you're practicing grammar rules. So if your grammar rules are in place, you will not make a lot of errors. Otherwise, you can also rely on Grammarly. I mean, it is certainly helpful to a large extent, but you cannot rely 100% on that software as well. Janvi saying that, can you provide more information about that diploma course from where we can enroll? Yeah, sure. I will share the link in the chat box. Just give me one moment. I will share that. Dinkesh is saying that I'm doing the company secretary, so it's become difficult to speak. I understand that a lot of times that, we are involved in a profession that doesn't involve talking. I think I'm a perfect example for that. Being a legal editor, my job doesn't really require me to communicate a lot. It's only when I have to mentor my students, that is when I'm required to speak to clients. Otherwise, I'm not exposed to an environment where I will be undertaking a lot of activities which require active communication. So probably you can start organizing sessions for the company that you're working on any topic, right? Or any discussion that you think will be helpful in your business. Now, being a company secretary, I understand it's very important for all of you to keep a tab about all the recent regulatory updates. So instead of just culling them out from the internet and working, what you can do is you can, maybe once a week or fortnightly, you can, organize sessions in your company and have discussions on a particular regulation that is out. Okay, so you can incorporate that in your office. I think that should be helpful. And if you're practicing individually, maybe you can create a group of fellow company secretary professionals and have that kind of an interaction, maybe every 15 days or weekly. That again will be very, very helpful. Mohit says that I'm in a job, but when I start, I feel nervousness. How can I overcome from it? So you'll have to constantly keep doing it, then only it will go away. So for instance, what I spoke about, teaching, okay? Or maybe like, since you mentioned you are in a job, again, the example that I was giving to Dinkesh with respect to how he can organize sessions on regulatory updates, you can match it with what you are working on, okay? You can also have sessions and activities planned at your office. Start doing it. I mean, it's okay if you fumble once, twice, thrice, but the important thing is that you do it, right? And also be very intentional about it. Let's say you fumbled once. Whatever mistake that you made, you can understand, you can work on it. Maybe if it's a pronunciation of a particular word, maybe if it's about communicating a particular idea, you can keep identify those gaps. Understand that we feel nervous about something when we are not confident about a particular thing, and when we are not confident, when we are not prepared, right? So if I give you a script and if I tell you that, Mohit, this is what you have to speak, if you know that script thoroughly, you understand everything from it, you'll suddenly be very confident, right? Because you're familiar with it. We are only nervous about situations when we are exposed to an unfamiliar environment. That is what brings nervousness. So you put yourself in situations that are unfamiliar to you a lot of times and get used to putting yourself in situations that are unfamiliar. So what will happen eventually is that you will not be scared. You will start feeling confident. Also, do a lot of activities that require you to speak. So you can organize events in your college, discuss, if you're a lawyer, maybe you can discuss latest judgments, latest amendments, right? We should speak to ourselves in front of a mirror so that overcome our nervousness. Maybe this is helpful 50%. Oh yes, this is of course one of the techniques that one can try. Noor says that I am good at grammar, but I'm not so good at communicating. Could you please suggest ways to overcome it? Yes, Noor. So, of course, for doing that, you will have to expose yourself to an environment where you are required to communicate. So, this is why we face that challenge. I mean, see, we can write maybe because we've been writing for 5 years, 3 years, 2 years, whatever. So, therefore, we're good at it. We can manage writing. We are also good at having basic conversations. I mean, if I had to speak a friend in English, I can do that because that's basic conversation. However, when I'm exposed to a more technical environment, let's say when I have to speak to a client or when I have to give a presentation, I might feel that, I am not very confident in putting forth my ideas. This can happen again for two reasons. Maybe I'm not fully prepared about the content that I have to speak, or maybe I am not very good at impromptu communication. So if it's the second one, that is the first one, of course, you can tackle by better preparing yourself. But if it's the second one, that is, if you're not good at impromptu communication, that is because our brain is not thinking in English. Our brain thinks in their native language. So let's say if you are a Hindi speaker, your brain will think in Hindi, and then when you have to speak, you translate it in English, and then you are able to communicate. So what you need to do here is that you need to develop a mindset where you are speaking you are thinking in English itself, right? And for this, what you can do is whatever the 5 habits that we spoke about, putting yourself into that virtual immersion, that will really help you. So Noor, what I'll suggest for you is that the habits, the 5 things that we discussed in today's session, you follow them religiously, track your progress. You will see, even in 15 days, you will notice a difference. You'll start thinking in English. So, instead of communicating in any other language, English will automatically become your default language if you virtually immerse yourself the way we spoke about. Any other questions, anybody? All right, so I'm quickly putting out the link for the English communication course here in the group. All right, whoever wants to enroll for this, they can do it. I mean, this course is really helpful for somebody who's looking to build their grammar, their drafting skills. All right. Now here by drafting skills, I do not talk about contract drafting and all of that. What I'm referring to is to understand the terminology that is used in drafting. Okay. So this is not legal drafting. This is understanding the terminologies that are used for maybe filing in. Yeah, I'm putting it in the chat box for your reference. Here's the link to the course. All right. You can register for it. If you enroll for the course, it will automatically give you an option of a WhatsApp group as well. Thank you so much, Noor. Your feedback also helps me in improving. So whatever you think about today's session, good, bad, whatever your thoughts are, please drop it in the chat box. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. I'll be again having a session tomorrow on communication. You can register for that as well. So I understand that a lot of you have this major issue about that, not very confident in speaking in English, you fumble a lot. Practice a lot, expose yourself to an environment wherein you are required to speak. There is no other option. You become the center of attraction so that you will have to speak in English. If you want, you can also subscribe to Toastmasters. That is also an excellent medium. Okay. Venkata is saying that they are not better at communicating in the conversation with the people. So here what you need to start doing is that maybe with your friends, you need to create a peer group who is also learning to speak English just like you, right? Identify those people, identify a set of people that want to improve Yes, Janvi, I'm sharing the link again here for the course. Okay, so you need to expose yourself to an environment wherein all the people are having a conversation in English. So maybe you can speak to a friend in English. That will be helpful. Okay, so it could be a very basic conversation about their daily life, their daily routine. Start having more conversations. Okay, you might fumble in the beginning, you might be nervous. That is okay. That shouldn't stop you from doing what you want. So sometimes what happens for a lot of people is that they start communicating in English. So let's say the first sentence they will speak in English and then they will move on to Hindi. Okay, don't let that happen to you. If you're wondering how will you complete that entire sentence in English, just communicate maybe a little slowly, but try and communicate your idea, whatever your thought that you want to deliver, do it in English only. So like we say, okay, when a child start running, they can't be super fast. Okay, they do it at their own space. Any activity, when a child is learning, when they're learning to walk, when they're learning to run, when they're learning to cycle, when we're starting, we are certainly slow with the activity. So similarly, when you're trying to communicate with your friends, just even if you're slow with it, that is okay, right? Go slow about it, but at the end of the day, ensure that whatever thought that you want to put it out there, it is in English. You're not switching languages in between. Don't move from English to Hindi. Stick to that particular language. Maybe slow down your communication, think what you're speaking. Okay, and try and speak your sentences in English only. You can try that out with your friend. You can have a buddy, maybe like just one person who's also trying to learn English just like you. Anybody from the webinar also, from today's webinar also, just have one buddy with you. Speak, have conversations, and that will give you a lot more confidence. I hope that helps, Venkat. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining in. We'll see you tomorrow.